You know, sometimes in astronomy, the most interesting things aren't what you see, but what you don't see. We're about to dive into a real cosmic detective story, one that starts with a beautiful star cluster that seems to have a gaping hole punched right through its heart. So what in the world could create a void in such a crowded place? Okay, so here's our subject. This is Messier 26, or M26 for short. It's an open star cluster, also known as NGC 6694. And at first glance, it's just this beautiful, scattered handful of celestial jewels. But if you look just a little bit closer, you start to see something, well, something strange. See it yet? Right there, near the core. There's this really distinct ring-like area where the stars just seem to, well, they just seem to disappear. It's a void, a dark patch where you'd expect to see the most stars crammed together. And that, right there, that's the central mystery we're going to try to get to the bottom of. All right, so to really understand the puzzle, we first need to get to know the scene of the crime, so to speak. Let's get our bearings on what exactly Messier 26 is. First off, this thing is far. We're talking 5,160 light-years away, hanging out in the constellation Scutum. To put that in perspective, the light hitting our telescopes from this cluster tonight started its journey around the time the first Great Pyramids were being built in Egypt. That is a long, long way away. And you know, in cosmic terms, it's just a baby. It's only about 90 million years old. Now, that might sound ancient to us, but our own sun is over 4.5 billion years old. So yeah, these stars are practically teenagers. So let's just recap. M26 is what we call an open cluster, which just means its few hundred stars are kind of loosely held together by gravity. It was actually discovered by the famous comet hunter Charles Messier, and for the most part, it looks like a pretty typical, messy, three-dimensional ball of stars. Except, of course, for that really strange secret lurking right at its center. So, this brings us to the big question. How do you explain that ring of nothingness? I mean, scientists have had to think really carefully about what kind of structure could even produce an effect like this. And you have to remember, this cluster isn't some flat picture we're looking at. It's a three-dimensional sphere of stars. So how could a feature that looks like a two-dimensional ring from where we're sitting actually exist inside a 3D swarm of stars? Well, okay, one idea is that maybe it's a long, empty cylinder bored right through the cluster. But for us to see that as a perfect ring, that cylinder would have to be pointed exactly at Earth. And astronomers, they really don't like coincidences like that. A much more likely idea is a spherical shell of nothingness. Think of it like a hollow ball. When you look at it, your line of sight goes through much more of the empty shell at the edges than it does through the middle. That's why a hollow sphere can look like a solid ring from any angle. Now, the first astronomer to really sink his teeth into this mystery was our scientific detective, a guy named James Cuffey, and he did this all the way back in 1940. He was determined to figure out what this strange spherical shell was actually made of. Or, not made of. And check this out. This was the original paper. Cuffey was studying the cluster. He called it by its other name, NGC 6694. And he was immediately struck by what he called the well-defined zone of low star density. He knew something weird was going on. Cuffey basically boiled it down to two main possibilities. Hypothesis 1, the ring isn't really empty. It's a shell of dark dust and gas that's just blocking our view of the stars behind it. Or, hypothesis 2, it's a real void, a region of space inside the cluster that genuinely has way fewer stars. So, which one is it? A cosmic smokescreen or a true empty space? This is where Cuffey's investigation gets really, really clever. He realized he didn't have to just guess. He could actually come up with a test to figure out which idea was right. So first, he proved the void was real. This is Cuffey's actual data from his paper. He painstakingly counted stars at different distances from the cluster's center, and you can see it right there in the graph. The star density is high, then it suddenly takes a nosedive. That's the void, before leveling off again. He scientifically confirmed the ring was a real feature. See, Cuffey knew that if a big shell of dust was there, it would have a very specific, measurable effect on the starlight that had to pass through it, and that gave him a way to test the idea once and for all. Okay, let's just walk through his logic here because it's so elegant. Step 1, if a dust shell is there, we have to look through it to see the stars in the very center of the cluster. Step 2, dust makes stars look fainter, and fainter stars look farther away. Simple enough. So step 3, Cuffey measured the brightness of the stars all across the cluster to see if the ones in the middle looked farther away than the ones on the outside. And what did he find? Step 4, he found no difference in the distance at all. Which leads to the final amazing conclusion: there's no big dust cloud. The void has to be a real, genuine region with a lack of stars. So, case closed, right? Mystery solved. Well, not exactly. See, Cuffey solved one puzzle only to create a much, much bigger one. One that still baffles astronomers to this day. Because how in the world do you maintain an empty shell of stars? As this quote explains, star clusters are dynamic, chaotic places. Everything's in motion. Having a neat, tidy void with sharp edges, gravitationally, it just doesn't make any sense. Probably the best way to picture it is to think of a swarm of bees. The stars aren't moving in nice, neat circles. They are all just buzzing around the cluster's center of gravity on totally random intersecting paths. And that's exactly why the mystery is now deeper than ever. Any empty space, like this shell, should get filled in by these randomly moving stars pretty quickly. To keep it empty, you'd need some kind of bizarre choreographed dance where all the stars have orbits that just so happen to avoid that specific region. And honestly, nobody has a good explanation for how that could happen, let alone stay stable for millions of years. So we are left with this fascinating question. Is Messier 26 a genuine cosmic marvel? Something truly unique that forces us to rethink how star clusters work? Or is it just a grand illusion? A random, temporary alignment of stars that just happens to look like a perfect void from our 1 in a trillion viewpoint here on Earth? Either way, this strange little hole, 5,000 light-years from home, is a perfect reminder that the universe is still packed with puzzles just waiting for us to solve.